is almost February 2024, which for a lot of us, that means it is almost time to start signing up for markets, events, pop-ups, and all those things. Usually those start happening in February and March, and then they start actually happening in April, May, depending on where you live and everything. But usually here in Omaha, they start really popping up in closer to March and April, and then they don't actually start happening till like May, June, just because it does stay colder here longer than most places, I feel like. So, but that just means that pretty soon it is going to be time to sign up for events this year. And so I wanted to talk about 5 questions that honestly I think that you should be asking either before you sign up for your event or before you've paid for it and like locked in your spot and everything. This is just some questions that I wish someone had told me sooner, things that I have learned over the past few years of doing events and stuff that I wish I had thought of sooner or thought to ask sooner, because it honestly would have saved me from losing money and paying too much for really subpar events that just, weren't great and weren't worth the money that they were charging and stuff. And so, yeah, so I just wanted to talk about these 5 questions that I feel like you should ask before signing up for an event. And if you guys are new here, my name is Nick with the 1994 Candle Co., and I am so excited that you're here. Number 1, I think you should be asking, how long has this event been ongoing? And is it a weekly, monthly, or yearly event? I think that that is an important question to ask just because you want to know how established the event is. Events that have been around a little bit longer and that are, they've been ongoing, either weekly, monthly, yearly, whatever, they're usually, like I said, more established, and that means that more people know about them and they come to them every year or, however often the event is happening. The reality is we signed up for a few, events that were almost brand new or had only happened, once or twice. And if it's like a weekly event, then, it might get more traction or whatever. But if it's only happening once or twice a year and it's a brand new event, like I said, and it hasn't happened that often, there's a good chance that not that many people are going to know about it or remember it from the previous year. And so there's a good chance, like I said, if it's still a fairly new event that not many people are going to know about it, and that could mean that you're just going to have some kind of lower sales for the day. And I would say that if an event like this is happening and they're charging like $100+ for this event, like to be in the event, I honestly wouldn't sign up for it. We decided this year that like anything charging over $100, it needs to be, it has to be more established. It has to have like a certain amount of people coming and things like that, just because it's just not worth it. We did too many this year that were really not well established. They hadn't been around for very long. I thought we'd give them a chance or whatever, and unfortunately it just kind of didn't work out for us in the end, and everything. We would either, just barely break even with what they were charging, or we would sometimes even lose money. I think around here in Omaha, at least, a lot of places, their baseline of like starting is just charging $100, which honestly is a bit much because there are a few events that we do that only charge around between like $50 to $75, and they do really well, honestly. And I would say that they are definitely more worth it even than doing some of the ones that are charging $100. Again, that might just be an Omaha thing. I don't know like what the price is in other parts of the country and stuff like that. If they're higher, cheaper, whatever. I don't know exactly if like $100 is just kind of the baseline wherever you go, or if that's mostly just here, but that kind of seems to be a lot of the starting numbers and everything like that. And sometimes I'm totally fine with paying that if it's a good event, but if it's a sucky event that, we only make $200 or whatever, it's just not worth it really, for all the setup and tear down and everything like that. Plus you add in the cost of your candles and you're really not making hardly anything. And so it's just kind of one of those things that you kind of have to balance on whether that you really think that's going to be worth it or not. But asking the question of like, how long has this event been ongoing, and also as well as, you know, is it a yearly, weekly, monthly event, and things like that. That will really help you kind of gauge whether you might think that it will be worth it for you to be at this event or not. And then the second question that I feel like really goes with the first one, really all of these tie in together, but really these first two are probably some really important questions that you should be asking. Number two is, how many people were at your previous events? Now this one's a little bit more obvious. I know that some people, you know, they typically usually ask that, or sometimes, you know, places will just let you know that information. Most of the places here, like, you do have to ask for that information. They don't just, you know, let you know up front or anything like that. But I think that is a good question to ask, especially along with that first question of, you know, how long has it been ongoing and everything. And also the reality is that a lot of these event coordinators do have multiple events that they do throughout the year. It's usually not just they're doing like one event only or whatever. They usually have, you know, multiple events and stuff like that throughout the year. And so I would also make the distinction of like, was that, you know, the number, whatever number that they give you for their last event, you want to make sure that that is the number like for this specific event. Because just because they say, you know, our last event had so many numbers, but if that last event was like in a completely different location, different name, different, you know, all these things, you know, there's still a chance that like this event is not going to do that well, just because, you know, nobody knows that new event's name or, you know, what it's called or anything like that. And so just because their last event did, you know, X amount of numbers or whatever, you really want to make that distinction of, was that the same like exact event, or at least in the same location, because that really plays a big factor into kind of how well these events and farmers markets and stuff like that do. We had an event this year, or this past year I should say, that they kind of got me in that they, you know, told us that, you know, one of their other events or whatever, like their last event had, you know, so many thousands of people and stuff like that. But it was an event that was in like a completely different location. In fact, it was like in a whole different state, I think. And so they were kind of an event coordinator that does, you know, several surrounding states, like in one area or whatever, and stuff like that. And so, yeah, it just, I felt a little misled when I found that out, but at that time I had already signed up, had already paid and everything, and so it was just like, well, we got to do it now. And that was one of the ones that we lost money at, because unfortunately the event that, you know, was established, or the event that, you know, we signed up for, it was the first time that that event specifically at that location was happening. And so there just wasn't, you know, a very big crowd of people or whatever. And so it just kind of was not great. Before we get to this next question, it would mean so much to me if you would give this video a thumbs up if you are finding some value in it, as well as subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, so that we can keep hanging out. This next question, really, you don't necessarily have to ask it so much maybe in this earlier part of the year, if it's going to be a little cooler and stuff like that, depending on where you live and everything. But if you do events during the summer, I would highly, highly, highly suggest that you ask the event coordinator before signing up if you'll be able to get a spot in like a shady area. That is important to ask, just because, at least for us, our candles, like, they do pretty decent in, I mean, they do decent even in hotter weather if there's shade that they're in. If they're in direct sunlight though, they are melting all over the place, and it is the worst. We have done a few events where unfortunately we were in direct sunlight, and like we were trying to do everything we could to move our tent around, move, you know, like we have the side panels and everything on the sides of our tent and stuff. But even that, sometimes if it's coming through the front, like there's just no way that you can, you know, obviously you can't put up the side panels on the front, because then no one can get into your booth. And so it's really important to ask if you can be in the shade and stuff, if it's going to be like one of those months that it's probably going to be a little hotter, like June, July, August. Those months typically are hotter pretty much wherever you live in the country. And so generally, I would just say it's better to be safe than sorry to ask for kind of a shady spot if they have one available. Usually event coordinators will be understanding and stuff. I would just make the distinction of like reminding them that you're a candle vendor and being like, hey, my products will literally melt if they're in the sunlight. So, because sometimes they, like they don't pay attention to who's asking the question. They might not have noticed that you're a candle vendor or whatever, and they might just be like, oh, this person is just picky and wants to not be hot or whatever. And it's like, well, I mean, yes, I don't want to be hot, but also the fact that my products will literally melt in the sun is not ideal. We had one event that we did in 2023, and we had asked them to be in the shade because it was going to be like a 90-degree day. Obviously, I mean, we didn't know it was going to be 90 degrees at the time, but we always just ask ahead of time if we can be in the shade. And they basically said, we'll do our best. And, I get it. I understand they can't accommodate everyone or whatever. But we got to the event and we were literally in like one of the only spots where it was full sun the entire day, shining right through the front of our tent. We will never do that event again. I will probably never work with those people again, honestly, just because I was super frustrated about it. Because there were literally like so many clothing vendors. Like I would say it was like an event of like 90% clothing vendors. And so none of them had issues with their products melting or anything like that. And it was a super hot day and stuff like that. And so I was not happy, to say the least. And there were plenty of shady spots. There were plenty of spots where the sun wouldn't be coming through the front of our tent. I even specifically said, like, it's okay if it comes through the back or the sides because we have back and side panels, but if it's coming through the front, like if we're facing direct sun all day, it's, like it's just gonna melt all of our products and stuff. And they basically said, well, we'll see what we can do, and then put us in one of the only spots that, the sun was shining directly through the front the whole day. So, and it wasn't like this was a new space for them. They own the building and everything, so they're there pretty much every day. They know where the sun goes and everything, so it's not, I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt, but realistically, it was a super frustrating day. And hopefully you will have better event coordinators than that who will take better care of you than that. Most of them do. Most of the time when we ask, they're like, oh yeah, no problem, no issues, whatever, and stuff like that, and they're super accommodating. That is really the only time that we've ever had that kind of an issue. And then the fourth question that you should be asking before signing up for events is asking if they are charging an admittance fee for the customers. The reason I say this is because in my experience, now I'm not saying that we only will do events where they charge an admittance fee, because we've done a few that didn't charge an admittance fee and they were still really great events and stuff like that. But a lot of the times, if they do charge an admittance fee, I have noticed that that kind of weeds out a lot of the people who are just kind of showing up for browsing and, they're just there to have fun. They're not really there to buy anything or whatever. They just kind of want to look around and, they're basically there to window shop and stuff. And like, that's fine. I get it. Like, I get it's kind of fun to go to those events and, just look around or whatever. But as a business owner, those are not the kind of people that you really want in your booth, because 9 times out of 10, they're just not going to be convinced to buy something if they're really not planning on buying anything. The people that go there with money ready to buy stuff and they're like, yes, I want to buy a few things or whatever, those are the people that you want. You don't really want a ton of people that are just there browsing or whatever. And like, obviously there's always going to be a few of those, and that's totally fine. But I'm saying overall, it kind of gets rid of a lot of those people who are just there showing up to browse, because if they're paying, however much it is, even $5, $10 or whatever to get in, most people are like, okay, well, I'm only going to go to that if I'm actually buying something, because they're paying to be there, so they're willing to spend money, obviously, and everything like that. And so I think that is a good question to ask. Again, it doesn't mean that you have to only sign up for events where they are charging that fee, but I think that will kind of help you gauge how well the event will go as well. We've had one or two events in the past where unfortunately it was not very busy already to begin with, and a lot of the people that were there, they were really just there to browse because it was a free event and everything for the customers. And so, it just kind of is not the most ideal situation when there's just a bunch of people who are really just there to browse. They're not really interested in buying anything. No matter how good your sales pitch or whatever is and stuff like that, they're just kind of like, whatever, and stuff. And so I think it's, if you can find the events where they are charging at least a little bit of an admittance fee, usually those events tend to go really, really well. And then the fifth question that you should be asking is, what is their marketing strategy for this event? And this question, they might not have a full answer for you right from the beginning, but if, it kind of depends on how far out the event is, and it also depends on a lot of the other things I asked, like how much are they charging for it, and, how well established is this event and things like that. So a lot of that kind of determines the marketing strategy, but they should have at least some kind of general outline of what they plan to do to market the event. And a lot of the times also, they will say something like, we also, expect all of our shops and vendors or whatever to also be marketing this event and stuff like that. But if they say like they're basically fully relying on the shops and stuff or the vendors to market for them, that's kind of a red flag to me, because that usually means they have zero plan on marketing it, and that just means that it's probably just not going to do that great. And usually, if they only are depending on the other vendors to market and stuff, every vendor is only bringing their own customers, so a lot of them are only there to shop with those specific vendors. And, you might get a few that are there to shop with you, but you're probably not going to have as many. But you'll get really varying answers on these depending on the event. Some of them will be doing like full-on radio ads, and they have billboards and signs to hang up at different places, and, just all this stuff or whatever. And then other ones will be heavily focused on like social media and running paid ads and stuff like that. If they are just saying that they're really only planning on like posting on their main social media page and like their Facebook event or whatever, you can check out their Facebook event and Instagram page and stuff and see how many followers they have and stuff, and that might kind of help. But like if they only have like a few people following the event, or even just a few hundred at the time, or they only have a couple hundred Instagram followers, there's a good chance that that's going to be a really small event, and everything. Obviously there's always exceptions to that, but yeah. So if they're not willing to at least pay for some advertising and stuff for the event, like through Facebook ads and stuff like that, it's, honestly, it's probably, like I said, just not going to be a great event. A lot of the really big events here in Omaha, they actually have like corporate sponsors and everything like that, which is another question that you could definitely ask them, is if they have any corporate sponsors, because that is usually, at least here, I don't know if it's this way everywhere, but at least here in Omaha, that is usually a really good sign that the event is going to go really well, because anytime, places have like a corporate sponsor, that means that they have a really pretty big advertising budget and everything like that, depending obviously on who the sponsorships are and stuff like that. But usually they have a really big advertising budget, and so that really helps to bring in lots and lots of people to the event. But like I was saying, they might not have a full, they're probably not going to even have the full list of you know, sponsors or anything like that for the year, but they should be able to tell you at least like if their previous events have had sponsors and they're planning to have sponsors, things like that. And they should be able to give you a general idea of what their marketing strategy is going to be. If they can't, and especially if the event is like coming up pretty quickly, like if it's only in a month or two and they don't have any kind of like general marketing plan, that's a big red flag to me personally. And so, you know, I probably would be really hesitant to sign up for that event personally. But those are the 5 main questions that I have that I usually ask or am going to start asking before signing up or paying for events. But if you guys have any to add to that list, I would love to hear your thoughts, or if there's any that you didn't quite understand or I kind of glossed over, just let me know down in the comments below and I would love to answer that for you. But that is going to be a wrap for today's video. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. If you'd like to continue hanging out, there's going to be some other videos that pop up on the screen, and I will see you there.